By 9 o'clock that Memorial Day morning, my kitchen smelled like brown sugar glaze, sweet corn, and the kind of slow-smoked ribs my late husband used to insist no one in Jefferson County could make better than me. I had been awake since 5, tying back my silver hair, setting out the blue and white serving platters, and folding cloth napkins into neat little squares the way I always did for holidays that mattered. Memorial Day had never been just another long weekend in my house. For 32 years it had been family. Flags on the porch, lemon pie cooling on the counter, my son at the grill, grandchildren running through the backyard with red popsicles staining their fingers. Even after Harold passed, I kept the tradition standing. Some things deserve to survive grief. I had already arranged the patio chairs in careful rows beneath the oak tree, laid fresh ice into the galvanized drink tub, and placed a vase of white daisies in the center of the picnic table by the time I noticed the sign. It was hanging from the front porch rail with thick navy ribbon, swaying lightly in the morning breeze like it had every right to be there. Cole Family Memorial Day Reunion, it read in cheerful red script. I stood there with a glass bowl of potato salad cooling in my hands and read it twice slowly, certain I had missed something. Cole. Not Harper. Not Harper Family Memorial Day. Not even Welcome or Happy Memorial Day. Just Cole. My daughter-in-law's maiden name stretched across the front of my house like ownership. I felt something small and cold settle beneath my ribs. Not pain exactly. Recognition. The kind that arrives quietly, after years of explaining away what should have been obvious. I was still standing there when Brittany's SUV pulled into the driveway, followed by another, then another, like some sort of cheerful parade I had not been invited to lead. Her mother stepped out first, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a tray of grocery store cookies, as if she were bringing a contribution instead of a performance. Her brother came behind her with a cooler slung over one shoulder, and the easy swagger of a man walking into a place he had never earned. Brittany climbed out last in white shorts and a star-spangled blouse, smiling like a woman arriving at a venue she had booked herself. "Perfect," she said, taking one look at the sign and beaming. "You saw it already." I looked at her, then at the ribbon tied neatly around my porch rail. "I did." She stepped past me without hearing the tone, already waving her family toward the backyard. "Mom, put the cookies in the kitchen. Mason, just set the beer wherever. Danny should be here any minute with the ice." "My kitchen," she said without saying it. "My house," she said without saying that either. Her mother breezed past me with a bright little smile and a "Morning, Evelyn," spoken in the same tone women use with hotel staff they do not intend to tip. Mason gave me a quick nod and carried his cooler through my front door without asking. Brittany reached for the bowl in my hands, barely glancing at me as she took it. "Can you put this in the fridge and make some more iced tea?" she asked. "Can you? Not would you? Not do you mind? Just can you?" Like I was already working the event she was hosting. I stood in my own doorway, empty-handed now, and watched her walk into my house carrying my potato salad like she had prepared it herself. Her voice floated back from the kitchen a second later, bright and practiced. "Mom, this island is perfect for the dessert spread." Her mother answered with a laugh. "It's a great space. You did such a good job setting all this up, sweetheart." Sweetheart. Not Evelyn. Not the woman who had bought the house, paid the mortgage, scrubbed the counters, planted the roses, and built every holiday in it by hand. Sweetheart. I stood on the porch with the sign still moving in the breeze above my shoulder and understood, all at once, that this had not started this morning. This morning was simply the first time Brittany had been bold enough to hang it where I could no longer pretend not to see it. I carried the tea pitcher to the kitchen because that was what women like me had always done when something ugly tried to pass itself off as normal. We carried the pitcher. We straightened the tablecloth. We bought ourselves time. The kitchen I had painted. Buttercream 12 years ago was already full of Cole voices by the time I stepped inside. Brittany had moved my deviled eggs onto a plastic tray shaped like a flag. Gloria had spread grocery store cookies across my marble island and pushed my lemon pies to the far end of the counter like an afterthought. Mason was standing at my sink, elbow deep in a bag of melting ice, pouring beer into my good crystal pitcher because he could not be bothered to find proper glasses. No one asked. They simply arranged themselves into my rooms as if familiarity and noise were the same thing as belonging. I set the tea pitcher down and opened the refrigerator to make space, only to find my shelves crowded with foil pans I had not bought and bottled sauces I did not recognize. Someone had moved my prepared fruit salad to the bottom drawer to make room for 2 tubs of store-bought coleslaw. My coleslaw, made fresh at 6 that morning, was still on the back counter untouched. "Can you slice the burger buns?" Brittany asked without turning around. She was standing in front of my stove, stirring my baked beans with my wooden spoon, speaking over her shoulder as if she had every reason to expect I would answer to her. "And we are going to need another tray for the hot dogs." That was the clever part of women like Brittany. They took what was yours and handed you just enough participation to make the theft feel communal. I looked at the island, at Gloria rearranging paper plates by color, at Mason opening drawers with the confidence of a man who had never once been told no in this house, and for one foolish second I nearly did what I had done for years. I nearly smiled. I nearly adjusted. I nearly let discomfort pass for manners. Then Gloria lifted one of my serving platters, turned it over in her hands and said, "This is lovely. Brittany, where did you get these?" Brittany laughed, light and easy, and said, "Oh, I have had them forever." I stood no more than 6 feet away when she said it. 6 feet from my own platter. 6 feet from the cabinet where I had kept it wrapped in linen since 1998. 6 feet from the life she had been borrowing credit from since the day she married my son. Something in me did not crack. It clarified. I saw it then with the kind of cold precision age eventually earns you. This was not rudeness. It was replacement. Not loud enough to be called cruel. Not sharp enough to be challenged without seeming petty. Just steady practiced erasure. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later carrying 2 bags of ice and a distracted apology, kissed Brittany on the cheek, and walked right past the sign on the porch without a second glance. Of course he did. Men miss what women survive inside. He came into the kitchen, saw the crowd, saw his wife at the stove, saw his mother standing beside the refrigerator with a knife still in her hand, and smiled like everything looked exactly as it should. "Smells great in here," he said. Brittany answered before I could. "We have got it under control." Again. Daniel set the ice down and went straight to the backyard. He did not ask whether I needed anything. He did not notice my pies moved aside, my kitchen taken over, my place reduced to utility. Or perhaps he noticed and chose the easier thing, which is what too many sons do once peace becomes more convenient than loyalty. By noon the house was full enough to feel unfamiliar. Folding chairs scraped across my patio. Children ran through my hallway with wet shoes. Someone turned the radio loud enough to drown out thought. I moved through it all like a woman touring a house she used to own, smiling when spoken to, stepping aside when needed, watching my life be reintroduced to me by people who had mistaken access for claim. By 1 o'clock, the house no longer sounded like mine. It sounded louder, looser, less careful. The kind of noise people make when they have never had to clean what they spill. Laughter rose from the backyard in bursts that did not include me. The screen door slapped open and shut so often it stopped sounding like part of the house and started sounding like a warning. I carried a fresh stack of napkins outside and found Brittany standing near the grill with one hand on her hip, and the other wrapped around a glass of sangria she had poured into one of my wedding goblets. She was laughing with 2 women I had never met, women in matching flag print sandals and bright lipstick, the kind who looked around a room as if they were already deciding what they would have done better. Brittany saw me, smiled, and lifted her glass in my direction. "There she is," she said brightly, as if she had just remembered I existed. "This is Daniel's mom. She likes to keep busy, so do not let her fool you into thinking she needs help." The women laughed politely. One of them smiled at me with the thin courtesy reserved for useful older women and said, "You raised such a good son. Not what a beautiful home. Not thank you for having us. Not this must be your place. Just Daniel's mother." Reduced in one sentence to the least inconvenient version of myself. I handed Brittany the napkins. She did not take them. She nodded toward the side table instead. "Can you set those by the condiments?" she asked, already turning back to her guests. I set them down because refusing would have caused a scene, and scenes are expensive when the wrong person controls the story. So I stood there long enough to hear Gloria tell someone I had always been more comfortable helping than hosting, and that was almost impressive in its audacity. 32 Memorial Days in this yard. 32 summers of smoke in my hair and citronella on my porch and children tracking grass through my kitchen, while I kept everyone fed and sunburned and happy. Harold turning ribs with a beer in one hand. Daniel learning to light a grill under his father's watch. My grandchildren asleep on patio cushions after fireworks. I had hosted birthdays, graduations, retirement dinners, Easter brunches, and the reception after Harold's funeral when half this town came through my gate carrying casseroles and condolences. Women like Gloria did not build traditions. They arrived late and called them effortless. I stepped away before my face could betray me, and moved through the yard with the quiet alertness of someone taking inventory after a storm. Every detail told the same story. Mason had dragged muddy folding chairs across the brick patio without bothering with pads. Someone had set sweating beer cans directly on the cedar side table. Harold built by hand. The white serving spoon from my grandmother's set was missing. My flower beds near the fence had been trampled flat by children no one was watching. Near the drink tub, one of Brittany's cousins was telling a group of strangers that Brittany had been planning this all week, and always loved entertaining. I looked at the full spread on the buffet table. My baked beans. My corn salad. My ribs. My pies. My linens. My house. Brittany had not planned a thing. She had simply stepped into the center of work already done and held still long enough for people to mistake proximity for labor. And the worst part was not that strangers believed her. It was that my own son did too. I found Daniel by the grill, turning sausages badly and squinting into smoke like a man performing competence for applause. "Everything all right?" I asked. He smiled, distracted, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. "Looks great, Mom. Brittany really pulled this together." I looked at him for a long moment, at the easy sincerity in his face, at how completely he had missed the difference between a woman who arranges a party and a woman who carries one. Then I nodded once and said, "Yes. She certainly seems to think so." He did not hear the weight in it. He had already turned back to the grill. And just like that, standing 3 feet from my own son in the backyard I had spent half my life building, I understood the cruelest part of being erased. It was not that someone took your place. It was that the people who should have known it was yours began to forget you had ever stood there at all. I went back inside because there is a particular kind of humiliation that becomes easier to study once you stop trying to survive it. The kitchen was warmer now, heavy with smoke and sugar and the sour sweetness of spilled punch drying on the counter. Someone had left mustard open beside my sink. A paper plate sagged on the floor near the pantry door, half covered in baked beans no one had bothered to pick up. My dish towel was gone. One of my kitchen chairs had been dragged into the den and now sat crooked beneath the television, where a baseball game played to a room full of men who had not once asked whose house they were sitting in. I stood in the center of it all and let the noise move around me while memory, sharp and orderly, began setting itself in place. It had not started with a sign on my porch. It had started in smaller ways, clever enough to dismiss if you were still trying to be generous. Thanksgiving 3 years ago, when Brittany had smiled over cranberry sauce and said her mother had already offered to host because it would be easier on everyone. Easier had meant smaller portions, paper plates, and my sweet potato casserole served in a disposable foil pan after Brittany forgot to take mine from the refrigerator. Christmas the year after that, when dinner had somehow moved from my dining room to hers, and I arrived carrying my roast only to find the table already full and a folding tray waiting for me near the hallway beside the children. "It will be cozier this way," she had said, as if comfort and exclusion were cousins. Easter brunch, when she changed the time by an hour and let me walk into a half-finished meal with cold coffee and empty chairs, then laughed and blamed a group text I had somehow not received. Daniel had apologized for that one. Not to me. To her. I remembered my grandson's 8th birthday when Brittany thanked every woman in the yard for helping except me. Though the cake recipe had been mine, the decorations had been bought with my money, and the gift table sat under the maple tree Harold planted the year Daniel turned 10. I remembered Mother's Day, when Brittany handed me tulips in a grocery store vase, and then spent 40 minutes telling everyone what her own mother had sacrificed for her. Gloria had dabbed at her eyes. Daniel had toasted them both. I had washed the dishes. Piece by piece, event by event, Brittany had done what women like her always do when they do not have the discipline to build authority of their own. She borrowed mine until she could perform it as if it had always belonged to her. She never took enough in one motion to force confrontation. She took by inches. Credit here. Placement there. A changed seat. A missed mention. A quiet redirection. A host erased not by insult but by omission so consistent it learned how to pass for personality. And every time I noticed I had done what decent women are taught to do. I had adjusted. I had smiled. I had made room. Not because I was weak. Because I was raised to believe family required grace. And grace, in the wrong hands, becomes permission. I opened the pantry and found the backup serving trays shoved behind 2 cases of soda Brittany had brought that morning. My own labels were still on everything, neat black marker on white tape. Corn. Buns. Ice scoop. Spare tongs. I had prepared for every contingency because that is what a hostess does. She thinks ahead. She notices what other people will need before they know they need it. Brittany had mistaken that labor for atmosphere. She thought hosting was the sign, the smile, the guests, the applause. She thought it was standing at the center of a room and receiving credit for comfort she had never learned how to create. I rested my hand on the pantry shelf and listened to her laugh outside, bright and careless and entirely dependent on work she did not know existed. That was when the final shape of it came clear. Brittany had not stolen my place because she wanted to hurt me. She had taken it because she truly believed it was easy. And that, more than the sign, more than Gloria in my kitchen or Daniel at that grill, was the insult I could not unsee. I closed the pantry door and stood still long enough to feel the shape of the afternoon settle into something useful. Outside, laughter rose again, careless and loud. Someone called for more ice. Someone else asked where the serving trays were. A child ran through the hallway with red punch on his shirt and sticky hands pressed against my wallpaper. The house pulsed around me with the kind of disorder that only looks effortless to people who have never been responsible for what happens next. I looked at the kitchen as it was now. My counters crowded. My sink full. My refrigerator door left open. The clean order of the morning had been replaced by the illusion of abundance, and already the seams were beginning to show. I dried my hands on the towel hanging from the oven handle and felt something in me go very calm. Not hurt. Not anger. Clarity. There comes a point in a woman's life when she stops mistaking endurance for virtue. I had spent years smoothing what should have been confronted, preserving comfort for people who never once confused my grace with cost. Brittany had not taken over my home because she was clever. She had taken over because I had kept rescuing her from the consequences of her own assumptions. Every holiday she had floated at the center of, I had been the weight beneath it. Every polished afternoon she had claimed, I had carried. The food appeared because I planned it. The drink stayed cold because I thought ahead. The guests stayed comfortable because I noticed what needed doing before anyone had to ask. Brittany had never learned how to host because I had never made her feel the absence of what I was doing. That was my mistake. And unlike hers, mine was old enough to correct. I took off my apron and folded it neatly over the back of a chair. Then I opened the drawer beside the stove and removed the small ring of keys I kept on the brass hook inside. Pantry. Garage freezer. Utility cabinet. Liquor hutch. The practical skeleton of every successful gathering in this house fit in the palm of my hand. I walked outside with the keys resting quietly against my fingers and found Brittany near the buffet table, refreshing a tray she had not prepared while Gloria explained my corn salad to a woman from her church as if she had invented it herself. Brittany looked up when she saw me and gave me the same bright smile she had been wearing all day, the one that assumed the room would always bend around her. "Can you check the hot dog buns?" she asked. "We are almost out." I smiled back at her, and for the first time all afternoon I meant it. "You seem to have everything well in hand," I said. She blinked just slightly, thrown not by the words but by the tone. Gloria turned her head. Daniel glanced up from the grill. "What does that mean?" Brittany asked with a little laugh, already uneasy because people like her always hear the shift before they understand it. I set the keys down on the edge of the buffet table beside the condiments. "It means," I said gently, "that you have worked very hard to make this your gathering. I would hate to get in the way." Her smile faltered only for a second. "Evelyn, do not be dramatic." It was the exact wrong thing to say, and she knew it the moment it left her mouth. I did not answer. I only nodded once, the way women do when they are done explaining what should have been obvious. Then I turned, walked through the house, and went upstairs. I changed out of my kitchen clothes and into the navy linen dress I usually wore to dinner in town. Pearls, low heels, lipstick. Not because anyone there deserved the effort, but because leaving well is its own form of speech. When I came back downstairs, the house was louder. The sink was fuller. Someone had spilled something near the den and left it. Brittany saw me crossing the foyer with my handbag and straightened so quickly she nearly dropped the serving spoon in her hand. "Where are you going?" she asked, too sharp now to sound gracious. I paused at the front door and picked up my sunglasses from the entry table. "Out," I said. "You are hosting. I am sure you will manage." And then I opened my front door, stepped past the sign with her family's name hanging from my porch, and left her standing in the center of everything she had wanted, with no idea how much of it had only ever worked because I was there. I drove 20 minutes to the lake and parked beneath a row of cottonwoods at the public overlook Harold used to like in late spring. The town was busy with holiday traffic, trucks pulling boats, children waving paper flags from back seats, the air bright with sunshine and the smell of sunscreen and cut grass. I sat in the quiet of my car with the windows cracked and let the silence settle back over me in layers. No screen door slamming. No strangers in my kitchen. No Brittany calling orders from my stove. Just wind moving across the water, and the distant hum of other people managing their own afternoons. I took off my sunglasses and looked out at the lake until the knot beneath my ribs loosened enough to become something almost like peace. There was a diner 2 miles down. The road where Harold and I used to stop after church in the summer. The kind with cold pie in the glass case and waitresses who still called women my age honey without making it sound like dismissal. I ordered iced tea, a turkey club, and a slice of coconut cream pie and sat by the window while families drifted in and out around me. No one needed me there. No one expected me to refill anything, smooth anything, rescue anything. It was astonishing how restful a meal could be when no one was borrowing your labor and calling it love. My phone buzzed for the first time while I was halfway through my sandwich. "Brittany." I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, Daniel. Then Brittany again. Then Daniel again. I set the phone face down beside my plate and finished my lunch. By the time I asked for the check, I had 6 missed calls and 2 voicemails. I did not listen to either. I walked next door to the little garden shop attached to the diner and bought a flat of white petunias for the porch boxes I had been meaning to replant. I took my time choosing them. White always looked cleanest against the red brick. By the time I reached the register, my phone was vibrating again. Daniel this time, then Gloria, then Daniel once more. I paid for the flowers, loaded them into the back seat, and drove another 10 minutes out past the county line where reception turned weak and patchy and the world, blessedly, became harder to interrupt. I spent an hour at the cemetery with Harold, brushing leaves from his stone and telling him, as I had for 3 years now, the things I no longer had any interest in saying aloud to anyone else. I told him Daniel had grown soft in the spine. I told him Brittany had mistaken noise for competence. I told him I should have drawn harder lines years ago, and that he would probably have told me so. The breeze moved through the cemetery maples in a dry whisper that sounded enough like agreement to make me smile. When I finally checked my phone again, the screen lit up with the kind of chaos that does not need explanation, only timing. 12 missed calls. 3 voicemails. 7 text messages. The first from Brittany came 40 minutes after I left. "Where are the extra buns?" The second 12 minutes later. "We are out of ice." Daniel's came after that. "Mom, call me." Then another. "Where is the propane tank key?" Brittany again. "Mason cannot find the charcoal." Gloria. "The downstairs toilet is clogged." Daniel. "Where is the serving tray for the burgers?" Brittany. "The freezer in the garage is locked." Then finally, nearly an hour after that, one from Daniel that made me laugh out loud in the front seat of my car. "Mom, did you leave on purpose?" I looked at the message for a long moment, at the astonishing lateness of the question, then set the phone down and started the engine. I did not answer. I did not need to. Somewhere across town, in the house she had been so eager to claim, Brittany was discovering what hosting actually was. Not applause. Not guests. Not a full driveway and a pretty smile. It was timing and foresight and quiet labor. It was remembering where the extra ice lived and how long the ribs needed and what ran out first and what broke next. It was carrying 12 invisible things at once so no one else ever noticed they were heavy. And for the first time since she married my son, Brittany was having to carry them herself. By the time I turned back toward town, the afternoon sun had begun its slow slide west, warm and golden and entirely indifferent to the chaos unfolding in my backyard. Traffic was thicker now, families heading home with coolers and sunburns and folding chairs rattling in truck beds. I took the long way back, windows down, one hand resting lightly on the wheel, and imagined the shape of the unraveling without needing to witness it. I knew exactly when the ice would have run out. About 40 minutes after I left. Once the children started opening the drink tub every 3 minutes and Mason forgot that warm beer becomes everyone's problem at once. I knew when the grill would begin to fail them too. Daniel never watched the propane gauge. He had never needed to. Harold always checked it the night before, and after Harold was gone I did. The spare tank sat locked in the utility cabinet because 2 summers ago Mason had borrowed one for a tailgate and returned it empty 3 weeks later. Brittany would not know that. Brittany would only know the grill had gone cold with half the hot dogs still raw and 20 people waiting. I could picture the sequence as clearly as if I had been standing in the yard. Gloria trying to keep smiling while moving empty platters around to make the table look full. Mason yanking open drawers with increasing irritation, leaving cabinets wide and handles sticky. Daniel sweating through his shirt, turning knobs on a dead grill as if effort and mechanics were the same thing. Brittany still smiling at first, then smiling too brightly, then no longer smiling at all. The first real crack would have come when someone asked for more ice and there was none. The second when the children started complaining there were no clean cups because paper had run out, and no one had thought to check the backup shelf in the garage. The third when the downstairs toilet stopped flushing because Brittany's niece had stuffed half a roll of paper into it, and no one in that family had ever learned that houses require more from you than occupancy. Small failures are never small in groups. They multiply. A missing tray becomes cold food. Cold food becomes irritated guests. Irritated guests become questions. Questions become blame. And blame in families like Brittany's always travels downhill. My phone buzzed again at a red light. Daniel this time. Then immediately Brittany. Then Daniel again. I let all 3 calls pass. At the next light I listened to the first voicemail. Not because I owed them urgency, but because I was curious. It was Brittany, breathless and trying very hard to sound composed. Evelyn, call me when you get this. We just need to know where you keep the extra serving platters, and Daniel says the garage freezer is locked, and I think the grill is out, but Mason is checking, so just call me back. The second voicemail was Daniel, no greeting, no pretense. Mom, call me. Brittany is overwhelmed, the food is behind, and Gloria is upset because the bathroom flooded. Just call me. Not are you all right? Not when will you be back? Just call me. I laughed softly and kept driving. By the time I reached my street, I did not need to pull into the driveway to know how the afternoon had gone. Cars were already gone from both curbs. Not all of them, but enough. Early departures are the social language of failed hosting. 2 of the folding chairs had been left crooked on the front lawn. Someone had dropped a paper plate in the flower bed and let the wind carry it where it pleased. The sign still hung from the porch rail, though one corner had come loose and now sagged low enough to look less like decoration and more like surrender. Through the front windows I could see movement. Fast movement. The kind people make when they are no longer entertaining, only recovering. I parked at the curb and sat for one extra moment with the engine running, looking at the porch, the tilted sign, the half-empty driveway, and the house that had finally done what I no longer needed to do for it. It had told the truth all by itself. I turned off the engine, gathered the petunias from the back seat, and walked up the front path as if I had simply been out for the afternoon, which in the most technical sense was true. The porch steps were sticky under my heels. Someone had spilled punch and left it to dry in the heat. One of my good serving spoons sat abandoned on the railing beside a half-empty paper cup, and a child's shoe no one had bothered to claim. The sign Brittany had tied there that morning still hung crooked, one ribbon half undone. The word coal bent inward where the cardboard had softened in the humidity. I opened the front door and stepped into the kind of silence only failed gatherings produce. Not true quiet. The sharper kind. Cabinet doors opening too hard. Voices lowered too late. The sound of cleanup done in anger. The foyer smelled like barbecue smoke, wet paper, and the faint sour edge of panic. From the kitchen came the clipped rhythm of blame trying to disguise itself as problem solving. Gloria was at the sink, sleeves rolled up, washing dishes badly and with the theatrical force of a woman determined to be seen suffering. Mason was dragging a trash bag through the hallway, leaking potato salad across my hardwoods with every other step. Daniel stood near the refrigerator with his phone in one hand and a dish towel over his shoulder, looking like a man who had spent the last 2 hours discovering that charm is not the same thing as competence. Brittany was in the center of the kitchen, hair falling out of its clip, lipstick gone, white shorts marked with mustard and something pink from the punch table. She looked up when I entered, and for the first time all day, she did not look like a hostess. She looked like a woman who had been introduced to the cost of being mistaken for one. No one spoke at first. They all just looked at me. At the dress. At the flowers in my hand. At the fact that I had returned rested. It was Mason, of all people, who broke first. "You could have answered your phone," he muttered, tying off the trash bag with more resentment than competence. I set the petunias on the entry table and removed my sunglasses. "You could have brought your own charcoal," I said, and kept walking. The silence that followed was so clean it almost felt medicinal. Daniel straightened. "Mom." Just that. One word, carrying apology, irritation, embarrassment, and the dawning realization that none of those things outranked the obvious. I stepped into the kitchen and took in the full inventory without comment. Melted ice across the floor. Burger buns gone. The emergency tray of sliced tomatoes still untouched in the locked garage cooler. They had never managed to access. My serving platters stacked wrong in the sink. One chipped. The downstairs bath mat wadded by the back door. A ring of sticky glasses around the island. And all through it, the unmistakable evidence of people who had expected a house to function like a stage set, with no understanding of what kept it standing. Gloria wiped her hands and lifted her chin. It got busier than expected. It was such a small sentence. So practiced. The kind women use when they are trying to make failure sound circumstantial. I looked at her, then at Brittany. "Did it?" I asked. Brittany set down the dish in her hand too hard. "There were not enough supplies, Evelyn. Not Mrs. Harper now. Not sweetness. Not performance. Just the flat edge of someone forced too quickly into honesty. We ran out of things because no one told us where anything was." I looked at her for a long moment, at the ruin of her confidence laid bare under fluorescent kitchen light, and understood that this was the first sincere thing she had said all day. Daniel exhaled and rubbed a hand over his face. "Brittany." It was not sharp, but it carried warning now. At last he was hearing how the room had sounded to me all along. Brittany turned on him immediately. "Do not start. I did everything today." And there it was. The confession tucked inside the complaint. Gloria had not hosted. Daniel had not managed. Mason had not helped. Brittany had stood in the center and called that labor. But now the room looked as it did because standing in the center had turned out not to be enough. Daniel looked at the counters, the sink, the floor, the half-cleared disaster of the afternoon. Then at me. Really looked. At the flowers in my hand. At the untouched calm in my face. At the kitchen that had only ever worked because someone had known how to run it. "Mom," he said again, quieter this time, and now it sounded less like a defense and more like the beginning of understanding. No one moved. That was the first honest thing the room had offered me all day. They stood in the wreck of the afternoon and let silence do what noise had failed to prevent. I set the petunias on the counter beside the sink and took off my gloves one finger at a time. Then I reached for the dish towel draped over the oven handle, folded it once and laid it flat beside the stove. Small motions. Familiar ones. The kind that quiet a room faster than shouting ever could. Brittany watched me with the brittle stillness of someone waiting to be rescued and furious that she needed it. Daniel watched me with something far less comfortable. Recognition. It is one thing to love the ease someone creates for you. It is another to realize how much of your comfort has been built on labor you never learned to see. I looked at the kitchen one last time. At the counters I had scrubbed that morning now sticky with neglect. At the sink full of dishes stacked carelessly enough to chip what mattered. At Gloria standing in my place with my dish soap on her hands and none of my authority in her spine. At Brittany, who had spent years collecting the appearance of effort, and had finally been left alone with the work itself. Then I looked at my son. "Take that sign off my porch," I said. Daniel did not hesitate. He set down the towel in his hand and walked to the front door without a word. Through the screen I watched him untie the ribbon himself. Not quickly. Not angrily. Just quietly, the way decent men do things once they finally understand they should have done them sooner. Brittany let out a short breath. This is ridiculous. Her voice was tired now, stripped of polish, but still reaching for indignation because it was the only defense she had left. It was one party. I turned to her. No, I said. It was one honest afternoon. That landed harder than anything louder could have. Gloria drew herself up, ready to intervene, but Daniel came back through the door with the sign folded once in his hand, and something in his face stopped her before she began. He set it on the table. He looked at Brittany, then at the kitchen, then at me. She made all of this look easy, he said quietly. No one answered. They did not need to. The room was full of proof. Brittany crossed her arms. I was trying to do something nice. I nodded once. Then next time, I said, try learning the difference between being seen at the center of something and being the one who holds it together. Her face changed then. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough for me to know she had heard me. Enough for Gloria to look away. Enough for Daniel to finally stop defending what he had not bothered to examine. I picked up the chipped platter from the sink, ran my thumb across the broken edge, and set it aside. Hosting is not the sign on the porch, I said. It is not guests in the yard. It is not being thanked for food you did not plan, in a house you did not prepare, with comfort you did not create. It is remembering what runs out first. It is knowing what needs ice, what needs time, what needs replacing before anyone asks. It is work. Quiet work. Constant work. And if you want a woman's place at her table, you had better learn what it costs her to keep one. No one spoke after that. Daniel picked up the leaking trash bag and carried it outside. Gloria turned back to the sink and washed the next plate with less performance and more care. Mason, for once, cleaned what he had spilled. Brittany stood where she was, not because she had nothing to say, but because for the first time all day she understood saying more would not help her. I took the petunias from the counter and carried them to the porch. The evening air had cooled. The ribbon marks were still pressed into the rail where her sign had hung that morning. I set the flowers down beside the steps and looked out over the yard, half cleaned and quiet at last. Then I went back inside, closed my front door, and let them finish in the house they had spent all day learning was never theirs to take.